Welcome to SomnoTales History, where the past isn't just told, it's felt, softly and slowly, like the beat of an ancient drum fading into the night. Tonight, we invite you into a time before time had names, a world of stone and silence, of firelight and survival, where language was a look, a gesture, breath. This is not a history lesson, it's a lived memory, one where the cold cuts through bone, where every bite of food is a victory, and where simply waking up alive is a triumph. Close your eyes now. Let the modern world slip away. You're about to enter the Stone Age, not as a visitor but as one of them. This is why you wouldn't last a day in the Stone Age, only on SomnoTales History. Close your eyes and let time unravel. Let the soft hum of the modern world dissolve into the silence of the ancient past. There are no buzzing lights here, no distant car engines, no digital screens glowing in the dark, just stillness, raw and unfiltered. The year is no longer 2025, it is tens of thousands of years ago, though no one here knows what a year even is. You are no longer someone from this century. You're barefoot, your body wrapped in animal hide, your breath visible in the morning air. You awaken not to an alarm, but to the dull ache in your stomach, reminding you, today, you must find food, or you will not sleep well tonight. The ground beneath you is cold and uneven. You slept in a cave, not for novelty, but because without it, you would freeze. The smoke from last night's fire still clings to the walls, and the embers give off a dim red glow. There's no door, no light switch, no thermostat. You are curled up on a pile of dry grass and animal fur, your bones aching from the hardness beneath. You rub your eyes, already coated with the grit of survival, and step outside into a world where everything is earned through effort. Your food, your safety, your very breath. You take in your surroundings, and they do not resemble the soft, organized landscapes of your current life. There are no roads, no buildings, no signs, only trees, stretching in all directions, their branches twisting against a gray morning sky. The air is heavy with moisture and the scent of moss, and your ears pick up the distant call of birds. But those birds aren't background noise, they are part of a system you depend on. Their sudden silence might warn you of a predator. Their calls might lead you to berries or insects. You are not at the top of the food chain here. You are a fragile part of it. You clutch a sharpened stone tied to a wooden shaft with dried sinew. It is your only tool, your lifeline, your silent companion in a world that offers no guarantees. Your hands are rough, not because you've been working hard on a laptop, but because you've spent your days skinning animals, digging roots, and carving tools from bone. One wrong move, and you could slice your palm. One infection, and there are no antibiotics. Pain isn't an inconvenience here, it's a threat to your survival. The group you belong to is small, a dozen people, maybe less. All of them are lean, sun-darkened, with eyes always scanning the forest. There's no language like, you know, it just gestures, grunts, the occasional urgent cry. Communication is simple, but vital. You learn that a look, a pointed finger, or a sudden shift in body language can mean life or death. Trust is everything. You rely on one another to stay alive. But trust can be fragile, especially when the belly aches and food is scarce. Today, the group will travel. The animals have moved on, and so must you. Your bones feel heavy, your legs are from the endless walking of days before. But there's no debate, no option to call in sick. You walk, or you are left behind. The path is not smooth. It is a trail made by countless feet before yours, animals, humans, both, and it's littered with roots that trip, rocks that bruise, thorns that tear. Each step forward is a small act of defiance against the wilderness that seeks to swallow you. As the sun rises higher, the warmth begins to touch your skin, but it does not comfort you. It makes you sweat. That sweat attracts insects. You slap them away, but they come again, buzzing in your ears, biting your neck. Some carry disease. You don't know which ones, and you can't afford to care. There are too many other things that might kill you first. You stop near a stream. The water is clear, cold, and moving swiftly. You kneel to drink, scooping it with your hands. There is no filter, no purifier, just your instincts. A wrong choice here, and you could drink something. That will make you violently sick. You hope the upstream is clean. You hope there's nothing dead in the water. You hope. That's all you can do. As you stand, you hear rustling, not the wind, something else. The group freezes. Every muscle tenses. A few raise their spears. Your heart beats faster. Could it be prey? Or is it a predator? You don't have binoculars or infrared cameras. Just your ears and your eyes. Your senses must sharpen. The rustling stops. Silence again. The tension lingers, coiled in your spine. No one speaks. The group slowly moves forward again, more cautiously now. Every bush hides potential danger. Every shadow could be hiding a set of eyes. You find footprints cloven, deep, fresh. Deer, maybe. The group splits. A few going left, a few right. You go with the older hunter. He moves like water, soundless, patient. He gestures, quiet, follow. You obey. He's seen more winters than most, which is to say he might be 35. Life expectancy is not a generous concept here. Every wrinkle on his face is hard-earned. Hours pass. The sun climbs, then begins to fall. You stalk, you wait, you breathe through your nose. And then, a flash of brown through the trees. The deer is there, eating, its back turned. The old man raises his spear. You raise yours. He waits. You wait. Your muscles scream from holding still. And then he throws. A clean hit. The animal collapses. He moves fast, finishing the kill, whispering something guttural that might be a thank you or a ritual. You help him drag the body back. The others return with nothing. You've had the only success. There's no applause, just nods, relief. Tonight, there will be food. The deer is butchered with care, every part used. The meat will be roasted, the bones turned into tools, the hide tanned and softened. Waste is a luxury no one can afford. As darkness falls, the fire is lit again. Its smoke drifts up into the mouth of the cave, carrying the smell of cooked meat and ash. You eat quietly, grateful. You think you've earned rest, but rest is not peace. You sleep with one eye open, hand near your spear. Dreams are light, disturbed by cold air and shifting stones. A sound outside. Everyone stirs. Is it wind? Is it something more? Someone checks, then returns. Nothing, they say with a grunt. The cave returns to silence. The fire cracks. You drift back into an easy sleep. And when morning comes again, nothing will be easier. Nothing will be safer. The cycle repeats. Hunger returns. The chase begins anew. And you, born in a world of screens and soft pillows, are learning that in the Stone Age, every breath is borrowed. Every comfort must be taken by force. There is no break room, no comfort food, no running water. There is only now, only survival. And still, the days go on. The sun rises again, pale and uncertain, veiled behind low-hanging mist that drapes the forest in damp silence. Your limbs ache from yesterday's chase, your calves tight from uneven ground, your back sore from dragging the deer. But there's no space for complaint. No one here asks how you slept. The only question is what must be done now. Ashes from last night's fire are pushed aside, and new kindling gathered twigs, dry moss, brittle bark from a birch tree nearby. The flint is struck, and sparks fly like tiny comets, briefly lighting the faces that crowd close to the warmth. A small flame breathes into life, then grows. You watch it, mesmerized. This fire is your only promise of warmth, your only shield. Against what creeps in the darkness, the meat is smoked slowly. It will preserve longer that way. The elders turn the strips of flesh carefully, monitoring the color, the scent. There are no thermometers here, no timers, only instinct, skill passed down by observation, by repetition. A child sits nearby, not playing with a toy, but copying motions with a small stick. Even in childhood, learning is survival. Games are lessons in disguise. You remember your childhood plastic, screens, cartoons. Here, childhood ends early, sometimes before the body is even done growing. You are told with a nod to gather. A move is coming. The deer kill will feed the group for some time, but it will also attract scavengers, hyenas, wolves, maybe even something worse. Your group does not linger in one place too long. The land provides, but it also takes. The rules here are quiet and final. When the birds fall silent, when the insects flee, when the air smells wrong, those are signs you must listen to. You begin the slow process of packing what little you have. A few tools, some dried roots, a strip of sinew, a wrapped piece of flint. There is no backpack, just leather tied around your waist, your chest. You carry only what your body can handle. The old woman in the group limps, but she is not left behind. A boy supports her, not because he's kind, but because one day she'll tell him something that saves his life. Knowledge is currency here. Oral traditions are more than stories, they are survival guides. If she dies, some part of the group's memory dies with her. You head out again. The trees are taller here, their bark split in silver, moss climbing their bases like time itself creeping upward. You hear movement in the canopy, small mammals perhaps, not worth hunting. Your ears become tools, just like your hands. Every footstep is placed with care. You are starting to move more like the others now, less noise, more awareness. The Stone Age is slowly reshaping you, chipping away your softness like a sculptor with obsidian. A sudden crack of wood underfoot makes you freeze. Everyone stops. The birds go quiet. You scan the trees. Nothing visible, but that doesn't mean you're alone. You crouch. You listen. The forest does not forgive mistakes. Eventually, the group resumes movement, one cautious step at a time. The silence lingers. Paranoia isn't a disorder here. It's a survival trait. The river you reach is wide and fast-moving. No bridge, no raft, just cold, biting current. You must cross. The water is frigid, numbing your feet instantly. Stones underfoot shift. One person falls. There's a sharp gasp, but strong arms pull them up. Nothing is said. You cross, teeth chattering, breath shallow. Once on the other side, you strip and wring the water from your clothes. Hypothermia doesn't care about your plans. Someone gathers reeds and dry grass for another fire. Later, you spot something in the distant smoke, faint and rising. Another group, perhaps. Not all humans are friends. Not all want to share. A quick council is held, silent gestures exchanged. You will move away from the smoke, not toward it. Too dangerous. You head north, toward the hills, where wild goats roam. Climbing is hard. The terrain punishes your ankles, your lungs burn in the thin air, but the view from above is majestic. Forest stretching endlessly, mountains cutting the sky, a lake glimmering far beyond. A cave is found, smaller this time, hidden behind brush. It's barely large enough for the group to squeeze inside. Still, it's dry. The fire is lit again. The wind howls outside, brushing the cliff like a giant hand. You eat what's left of the dried meat. Tomorrow, you will hunt again. Tonight, you listen to the wind. You hear the old woman begin to hum a low, slow melody, not quite a song. It comforts. No one asks for more. Her voice weaves through the air like smoke. Night falls like a blanket soaked in ink. Stars appear, no streetlights here to dim them. They shine cold and clear, glittering like eyes watching from above. You lie close to the fire, body curled, back to the rock wall, your spear nearby. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come easy. Your mind races. What if there's something out there? What if the group doesn't wake up? What if you can't find food tomorrow? But eventually, your exhaustion claims you. The fire crackles. The stars will silently above. And somewhere, in the distance, a wolf howls long and low. A chill runs through you, but your eyes stay closed. You're beginning to understand. Here, survival is not a dramatic tale. It is quiet. It is slow. It is relentless. And when morning comes again, no one greets it with celebration. The work resumes. Always the work. A snare must be checked. A tree climbed for eggs. A hollow rock cracked for insects. Protein is protein. You follow an older woman into the underbrush. She shows you a plant with wide leaves and yellow roots. Edible. Another with white berries, deadly. She makes you touch, smell, remember. You nod. This knowledge is more valuable than gold, because gold won't stop your stomach from turning. Inside out. By midday, the heat rises. Fli swarm. Your eyes squint against the glare. Sweat pours from your brow. There's no sunscreen, no sunglasses. Just your own patience. Then, motion something running through the tall grass. Rabbit? Too fast. But the chase is on. Two of the group give pursuit. They vanish into the grass, silent as smoke. You don't know if they'll succeed, but you wait. That's the rhythm now. Run, wait, starve, feast, sleep, wake. Hours pass. They return empty-handed, but no one scolds. No one pities. It just is. You rest in the shade of a tree, chewing bark to curb hunger. Your jaw aches. Still, it helps. The bark is bitter, but it numbs. The old man beside you uses a stone to chip a piece of flint. You watch. Sparks fly. He hands it to you, and with it, silently says, make your own. Learn, because one day, you'll be the only one left. The sun dips again. Another day slips into darkness. You lie on hard ground, your body sore, your belly half full. But you're alive. And here, that's everything. The wind tonight is different. It moans through the trees with a voice that sounds almost human, as if the forest itself remembers something ancient, something sorrowful. You shift in your sleep, stirring from a dream where warmth and softness existed, where a bed had corners and food came in paper wrappers. That world feels like fiction now. You've stopped counting days. Time moves differently here, not in hours or minutes, but in tasks, in hunts, in fires lit and extinguished. You wake not when you want, but when the group begins to stir. You rise because the others do, and in this world, staying still means being left behind. The cave is darker than usual, the smoke from last night's fire clinging low like fog. You rub your eyes and step outside. The sky is a pale sheet of clouds, dimming the sun's usual golden reach. The air is cooler. Autumn is arriving. You feel it in your bones. In this world, seasons aren't moods or aesthetics. They are threats. And fall means winter is near, which means hunger is coming. Preparations begin in silence. The group will gather roots, berries, and whatever small game they can find. Every member has a task. No one wastes energy on idle talk. You're sent with two others, one younger, one older, to check a series of traps set deep in the woods. You carry your spear, but you're learning that most hunting ends in failure. Still, every twig snap, every rustle of grass keeps you alert. You are prey as much as predator. The forest seems older today. The trees creak, their branches brittle with age. You pass a stone carved by time and weather, its surface bearing ancient grooves. Maybe someone once sat here, generations ago. Maybe they saw the same view you see now, trees bending to the wind, a squirrel darting up a trunk, a hawk circling high. The thought both comforts and unsettles you. This land has forgotten more people than you'll ever know. You reach the first trap, a simple pit lined with sharpened stakes. Empty. The second, a snare fashioned from twisted vine, holds a rabbit. Thin, trembling, nearly dead already. The young hunter quickly dispatches it. The older one says nothing, only nods. A rabbit isn't much, but it's something. You carry it gently, the way one holds a secret. On the way back, you dig up wild onions and a few bitter roots. Every calorie counts. You wonder if you've ever truly been hungry before this life. Back at camp, the rabbit is skinned, its fur carefully set aside. The meat is small, barely enough to flavor the soup boiling in a carved stone bowl. A woman drops in the onions. The scent is sharp and earthy. No spices, no salt, just heat and need. When it's ready, everyone takes a sip from hollowed gourds. No bowls, no spoons. You drink it like it's holy. And in a way, it is. As the day fades, the group gathers around the fire. Tonight, the old man speaks. His voice is gravel and wind. He tells of a great hunt from many winters ago, of a beast with fur like night and eyes like stars. You can't tell if the story is true, but no one laughs. Here, stories aren't just entertainment. They are maps of thought, blueprints for survival, vessels of memory. You listen, wide-eyed, watching the fire dance in his eyes. His words carry the rhythm of the past. You realize, In a world without books or screens, stories are everything. That night, you dream not of beds or blankets but of the forest itself. You see it breathing, slow and vast, alive in ways you never noticed. You see your group walking, its spine, tiny and determined, carrying firelight in the cradle of their hands. You see shadows that move where nothing should, and feel the weight of time pressing down like snow on a roof. When you wake, frost glitters on the ground. Your breath mists. Winter is not coming, it is here. The group moves quickly now. There's urgency in the air. Tools are checked, hides repaired, shelters reinforced. You are sent to gather firewood, not branches from the ground, those are damp but dead limbs still clinging to trees. You climb, fingers numbing, legs trembling. Each branch you snap feels like a victory. You tie them in a bundle, drag them back. Hunger tightens its grip. The rabbit was days ago. Berries are gone. Roots are harder to find. Snow hasn't fallen yet, but the wind carries its promise. The elders speak less. Faces are gaunter. Even the children are quiet. You begin to understand that survival isn't a single moment, it's a season. A stretch of days where every choice, every mouthful, every spark from the fire matters. You track deer with a small group, deeper into the woods than ever before. You move for hours, cold biting through your furs. Then prints, fresh. You follow, breath clouds the air. Trees close in. You see movement. A buck, proud and heavy. The hunters prepare, spears raised. One throws, misses. The deer bolts. You give chase. Your legs scream. Branches whip your face. You leap over roots. Then, a blur, a fall. You hit the ground hard. Wind knocked out. By the time you rise, the deer is gone. Defeat tastes like blood in your mouth. You limp back to the group. They say nothing, just hand you a root to chew. You bite, even as your jaw aches. The world does not pause to comfort you. Snow falls that night. Soft at first, then steady. The forest becomes silent in a new way. A heavy way. You huddle near the fire, your face burning, your back freezing. You sleep in shifts. Someone always keeps watch, not for enemies, for the fire. If it dies, so do you. The days become a blur. Gathering, hunting, failing, enduring. You find mushrooms in a hollow log. The old woman inspects them. She nods. They're good. You share them that night, warmed on a flat stone. The flavor is smoky and strange. You savor every bite like it might be your last. One day a stranger appears, alone, thin, wrapped in strange furs. The group tenses, spears raised. The stranger lifts their hands empty open. A tense silence. Then, the old man steps forward, says something low and firm. The stranger responds. After a long pause, he is allowed to sit by the fire. He shares dried fish. In return, he receives warmth. For a night. The next morning, he is gone, left before dawn. No one speaks of him again. You wonder who he was. A scout? A survivor like you? Will he return with others, or disappear into the snow like a ghost? Time passes. You mark it by moon cycles now, by the way the sun struggles to rise each day. The group has changed. Faces thinner, yes, but eyes sharper. Even you have changed. Your hands no longer shake at the cold. Your feet find paths without looking. You wake before others, sometimes, stoke the fire yourself. You're no longer visiting this world. You are becoming part of it. The snow does not stop. It falls in sheets now, wrapping the forest in a thick, cold silence. Each flake lands softly, but carries with it the weight of winter's grip. Your breath is a steady plume before your face, and your fingers, wrapped in stiff, cracked leather, tremble not from fear, but from cold that never quite leaves. The air bites deeper with each passing day. Firewood is harder to find, buried beneath layers of ice. You dig with numb fingers, break frozen branches with your heel. Anything to keep the fire alive. One more night, hunting becomes a near impossible task. The animals have retreated, vanished into burrows and deep forest cover. Their tracks are lost beneath new snow each morning. The group eats less, bellies shrink, bones sharpen under skin. Still, no one complains. That takes energy. That wastes breath. Instead, there is a quiet grimness, a shared understanding that this is how it is. The winter does not hate you. It simply doesn't care whether you live or die. You learn to save warmth, to sleep closer to others, to let your skin touch theirs. Not from affection, but from survival. You find yourself listening more to the old woman's breath as she sleeps, to the soft huff of a child's shifting body. These sounds become your measure of life in the dark. The fire cracks, spits, nearly dies. You wake, always half awake, feeding it more than once each night. Then, a day comes when the sky clears. The sun, pale and tired, peers through the clouds. A brief reprieve. The snow crusts underfoot, easier to walk on. The group decides to move to find new shelter, perhaps a better place where animals might still be hiding. You pack up the few things you have: a flint blade, a skin of water, a small pouch with crushed dried mushrooms. That's all. That's everything. The journey is quiet. No one sings. No one jokes. Your feet crunch in rhythm, a steady sound under heavy breaths. The trees are bare skeletons now. Their branches scratch the sky like bones. You pass a frozen stream, its surface cracked like glass. The youngest of the group slips. You help him up. Grip firm. Wordless. He nods, his lips too cold to speak. Hours later, you spot something tracks. Not human. Large. Deep. Your group circles them cautiously. Could be a predator. Could be food. The old man crouches, touches the impression. With his hand, warmth rises from the ground. The animal is close. A decision is made. You will follow. Spears are checked. You grip yours tighter than ever. The tracks lead to a ridge. You climb in silence. Your breath wheezes. At the top, you see it, a reindeer, alone, pawing at the snow to find grass. It's weak, thin, but it would feed everyone. The hunters fan out. You stay behind, heart pounding. You see the lead hunter raise his arm, signal stillness. Then motion. A whistle cuts the air. Spears fly. The reindeer jerks, flees, but stumbles. Blood paints the snow. The final spear takes it down. The group surrounds it quickly. There's no triumph, only relief. You help with the work, cutting, cleaning, wrapping meat in hide. Your hands are red and stiff, but you do not stop. The blood steams in the cold air. You return late, heavy with food. The fire is roaring before you reach it. The old woman smiles for the first time in days. That night, the meat cooks slowly. The smell lifts everyone's spirit. You eat greedily, then slowly, savoring each bite. Fat drips down your chin. You laugh, just a little. So does someone else. It's not joy, but it's something close. Sleep comes easy with a full belly. The fire is strong. You dream not of survival, but of warmth, of a younger world. Maybe one where the air didn't hurt your skin. You see visions of animals long gone. Mammoths walking through mist. People dancing around fire, their faces painted, their laughter echoing across time. You wake slowly, not with panic, but with the strange sense of belonging. Winter continues, but the worst seems behind you. The days grow slightly longer. The air is still sharp, but the sun feels bolder now, like it might one day win again. You begin to travel less, hold to a small valley where food is easier to find. The group digs pits for storing meat, covers them with branches and snow. You make snow shelters lined with bark and moss. Tools are repaired. A new spearhead is shaped from flint and bone. You help. The child whose hand you held weeks ago now follows you. He mimics your movements, the way you tie sinew, the way you scrape hides. You don't speak much, but you show him. This is how things are passed on, not through lectures, but through repetition, through presence. You realize the child may one day teach someone else, with the same movements, the same silence. A group member becomes ill. The old woman mixes bark and boiled water, presses moss to the fevered head. The sick man coughs through the night. No one sleeps much. In the morning, he's quieter. By evening, he stops breathing. The group stands around, not a crying, just quiet. A few stones are gathered. His body is carried to a ridge, left with care, not hidden from the world, but returned to it. The sky is red as the sun sets. You think of his face, the way he laughed when the meat sizzled weeks ago. And then, as the cold bites again, you walk back. Time continues. The snow begins to melt. Small streams form. You smell earth again. The forest stirs. Birds return. You wake one morning to their call, and it feels like music. The child points, smiling. You smile too. It is still cold, but you feel hope creeping back in with the warmth. You catch a fish in a shallow pool. It flops in your hand, silver and alive. You carry it back with pride. The group eats better now. Roots sprout again. Small berries appear. You eat carefully, the memory of poison still close. The fire feels gentler at night. You sit with the old woman. She hums again. This time, the melody is slower, fuller. The child hums along. You listen, watching the sky, painted with stars. You don't know how long it's been since you arrived here, but you are not the same. Your shoulders have widened. Your walk is quieter. Your ears pick up things your eyes can't see. You are still afraid of predators, of hunger, of cold, but you are also ready. You understand the rhythm of this life, the cycle of effort and reward, of loss and survival. You are not a visitor anymore. You are one of them. The thaw brings both promise and peril. Where once snow blanketed the world in silence, now the land oozes with meltwater, slick and uncertain. The rivers swell and surge, greedy and loud, tearing away at the banks like hungry mouths. Crossing them becomes dangerous again. What was once frozen and passable now threatens to pull you under with every misstep. The paths you knew vanish in mud and rushing currents, and even the trees seem different, their bare limbs twitching in a newfound breeze that smells of rot and awakening things. You don't fear the cold now. You fear what comes with the warmth. Spring, in the Stone Age, is not soft. It is not gentle flowers and new beginnings. It is a shaking off of the dead, a violent gasp after months of stillness. Insects return in clouds, biting, buzzing, relentless. You wave them off your face, but they crawl under your clothes, into your ears. Every itch could be a sting. Every sting could be a fever. You remember the man who died in winter, and you know you must not fall sick. Not now. Not when life is just returning. Food is more plentiful. The forest floor brims with signs of life, small shoots, mushrooms, birds' nests with eggs. But even this is a test. Not everything that grows is safe. You've learned to crush a leaf and sniff it, to taste a sliver of bark and wait, watching your own skin for signs of burning or swelling. The old woman watches you closely. When you get it right, she nods once. That is praise enough. You're learning not just to survive, but to remember what the earth offers and what it takes away. One day, the child brings you a bird's egg, whole and warm from a nest he climbed for. His face is proud, but his arm is scratched, bleeding slightly. You clean the cut with moss and chew a bitter root before pressing it to the wound. He winces but does not cry. You nod. He nods back. There is no need to speak. You help him roast the egg on a flat stone, turning it carefully so it does not crack. The smell is rich, earthy. You give him the first bite. He smiles, and for a moment, you forget the harshness. You forget how hard it was just to stay alive through the winter. For a moment, there is only the warmth of fire, the quiet pride in another's eyes, and the taste of food made with effort and patience. The group begins to move again, following the herds. You travel across rocky ridges, across plains that seem endless under a sky so wide it swallows your thoughts. The nights grow warmer. You sleep under stars now, not in caves. You lie on your back, the fire crackling beside you, and watch constellations shift. You don't know their names, but you feel their presence. They are stories in waiting, maps you've yet to read. One day, the group comes upon something unexpected, a strange circle of stones, taller than a man, weathered and ancient. Not yours. Older, made by hands you will never know. No one touches them. The air around them is thick, quiet. The old man mutters something, a word you don't understand. The group moves on quickly, eyes averted. You look back only once, the stones still watching. You feel them in your spine long after they disappear behind the trees. Another day, you spot fire smoke in the distance. This time, The decision is made to investigate. Carefully, silently, the group approaches a clearing where another band has camped. They look like you, thin, dirty, alert. Their fire is large, their tools familiar. For a moment, no one moves. Then the old man steps forward, palms raised. After a pause, one of theirs does the same. A slow exchange begins. Words you don't know, gestures, grunts. Eventually, both groups sit around one fire, eating dried meat, passing around boiled roots. You sit beside someone unfamiliar, her eyes dark, her face scarred from old burns. She watches you the way animals do, carefully, not without curiosity. You offer her a piece of bark with honey you'd found earlier. She takes it, chews slowly, nods. For tonight, you are not enemies. For tonight, the forest is still. You share warmth. You share space. You remember that even in this world, there are moments of peace. But peace is never permanent. The next morning, the strangers are gone. A few of your tools are missing. So is the old man's spear. No one speaks. There is no anger, only a quiet acceptance. This is the way of things. You make a new spear. The child helps you. The land shifts again. The grass grows taller. Flowers bloom and die in days. You find a cave painted with ochre handprints, animals drawn in graceful lines, a sun with rays that stretch across stone. You sit for a long time before the wall, running your fingers over the faded shapes. You wonder who painted them, what they feared, what they dreamed. Were they like you? Were they still here, buried beneath the soil? Their stories only ashes now? You press your own hand to the wall, just for a moment. Then you leave. The hunting grows easier. You are faster now. Your throws are more accurate. One evening, you bring down a wild boar with help from two others. It's messy, brutal, but efficient. You clean it with steady hands. The meat lasts for days. You smoke it carefully, hang it from tree limbs. The smell draws insects, so you build a small fire beneath it, the smoke keeping the swarm at bay. You feel pride, not loud, not boastful, just quiet pride. There are new tools now, scrapers made of antler, blades honed from flint with edges that gleam like ice. You carve with more confidence, shaping wood for spear shafts, bending it slowly over the fire to make it strong. You find rhythm in the work. Your hands move even when your mind drifts. You think of the child, of the old woman, of those who are gone. You think of nothing at all, and the tools from under your fingers. Storms come, rain like teeth, wind like a scream. You take shelter in a crevice, soaked and shaking, your fire smothered. The night is long, endless. You curl into yourself and wait. The world does not care that you are tired. It does not pause for your comfort. But you wake, alive. And that is enough. The days grow longer again. The grass thickens. The animals return. You find new paths. You cross rivers. You see mountains in the distance, their white caps glowing in the sun. You do not know what lies beyond them, and you do not need to. For now, you have food. You have warmth. You have fire. You have story. The child paints something on a stone, with crushed berries and soot. A deer, maybe, or a person. You can't tell. It doesn't matter. It means something to him. You nod. He smiles. That night, the stars return in full. The group gathers close. Someone begins to hum. You join, not with words, just breath, rhythm, memory. The sound floats into the night, into the trees, into the dark sky. The fire burns steady. The wind is gentle, and for now, you are alive. Still here, still standing. You wake before the fire, before the sun. The stars are still scattered above like tiny white stones across an endless black river. Your body is stiff from sleep on the uneven ground, and your breath forms mist in the cool morning air. The others are still curled in sleep-silent shapes under furs and leaves. But something inside you has stirred before the world. You rise slowly, careful not to wake the child sleeping near your side. The coals of the fire are still glowing, just barely. You feed them dry bark, blow gently, and wait as tiny flames awaken once again. The sound of the forest is different in these moments. Not silent, but expectant. The wind carries scents still clinging to night, the musk of deer, the distant tang of ash and soil, the earthy rot of leaves turning back into earth. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls. One call, no reply. It is too early even for most of them. You sit near the fire, warming your hands, and let your mind drift. There are no clocks to watch, no minutes ticking by. Time here is marked by the shift of shadow, the scent of air, the movement of light across stone. You've learned to read it like a slow, endless story. The chapter today is barely beginning, but you already feel its weight. The group plans to head toward the edge of a deep ravine. Rumors, if such a word can exist in a world without words, speak of game down there. Goats, perhaps. Maybe something larger, dangerous terrain, but worth it. Everything is a balance between risk and reward. The group stirs. The old woman is the first to rise, always. Her knees crack as she stands, but she does not wince. She breathes deep and nods at the fire. You nod back. She begins chewing on dry root while checking the gear. Cords, flint, sharpened points. No words. All understood. By the time the sun appears above the trees, everyone is ready. The child is at your side, carrying a smaller version of your tools. He walks like you now, alert and quiet, steps placed with intention. You carry no luxuries, only what you need. The walk to the ravine takes hours. The path is steep, overgrown. Thorns catch your clothes. Rocks shift beneath your feet. At one point, a group member slips, tumbling down a shallow slope. He groans but rises with a laugh that breaks the quiet. For a moment, even the forest seems lighter. Then, the ravine appears deep and wide, its edges jagged with broken stone. Wind rushes through it like breath escaping from the lungs of the earth itself. Far below, you spot movement shapes against rock, brown and white. Goats, maybe a dozen. Your heart lifts, but not too much. You've learned not to let hope carry you too far. You and the others watch for a long time. You trace the paths with your eyes, memorizing the rocks, the possible routes. One mistake, and you could fall. But if you succeed, the group eats for days. Plans form in gestures. The most agile will climb down. Others will wait with spears in case the animals flee upward. You volunteer, and the old man looks you in the eye for a long moment before nodding once. The descent is slow. Every handhold is tested. Every step taken with breath held. The child watches from above, unmoving. You grip a jutting stone, swing down, land hard but steady. The air in the ravine is cooler, thinner. You hear your breath louder here. You move closer to the goats, now clearly visible. Some look up, twitching their ears. One bleats, alarmed. You freeze. Another group member makes a noise above, startling them. They bolt, but not all upward. Some run laterally, one even lower, but two run straight toward your climb path. You brace yourself. As one bounds upward, you lunge, driving your spear forward. Contact. A sudden thud, the goat stumbling, legs kicking. It falls to its side, gasping, then still. The second escapes. You exhale. Blood steams on the stone. Your hands shake, but only slightly. The kill is quick, clean. You call out a low sound, not a shout, and the group above responds. The old man and two others begin climbing down to help. The process of butchering begins immediately. Time is precious. The meat is cut into strips, the hide set aside. You work without thought, your hands moving from habit. The child watches from above, learning. The climb back is harder with weight. The meat is tied and slung over shoulders. One misstep could cost everything, but slowly, carefully, the group regathers at the top. The fire that night is larger, the meal richer. The child eats slowly, chewing each bite with reverence. He does not speak, but he glances at you often. You see what he carries in that look. Respect, gratitude, curiosity, the beginning of something passed down. That night, the old woman tells a story, one with her hands, her face, her eyes. You've heard pieces of it before. It is about a man who once hunted a bear, alone, not from pride, but from necessity. She mimics his climb, his breath, the strike. She mimics the bear's roar, then its silence. The fire flickers across her features. The child listens with wide eyes. You do, too. The line between truth and myth doesn't matter here. Stories are bones you build your memory on. The days that follow are less intense. The group remains near the ravine. Water is nearby. The weather is kind. You spend time repairing tools, teaching the child how to shave bark into thread, how to split stone without shattering it. He learns quickly. The old man watches once, then walks away with a nod. A sickness comes. Not violent, slow, a cough, then weakness. The old man begins to sleep more. He eats less. You sit near him at night, watching the firelight play across his lined face. He does not complain. He smiles once, faintly, when the child brings him water. One morning, he does not rise. The old woman places a hand on his chest. Silence. No announcement is made. The group knows. You help carry him to a high place, wrap him in bark and hide, place stones around him. The child watches. He does not cry. Neither do you. The old woman hums something low as the wind whistles through the grass. The next day, the group begins to move again. Slowly, you lead more now. The child walks closer to you than ever before. You cross hills, wade streams, avoid bogs and swarming insects. You chase birds. You set snares. You sleep under open skies. And always, you keep the fire alive. One morning, the child wakes you early, tugging at your shoulder. His eyes are wide, full of urgency. You rise quickly, hand on your spear. He leads you to a spot where the earth is torn, deep gouges in the dirt, broken branches, tracks, big, fresh, not deer, not boar, something heavier. You recognize the shape. A bear. A large one. You signal the group. Plans are made fast. You do not want to fight, but you must know where the bear is. It could destroy everything. You move carefully. The forest holds its breath. You spot it, finally, near a shallow stream. Drinking. Massive. Muscles ripple under its fur. You watch from a safe distance. It does not see you. You back away, step by step. The group will go around. Leave this place behind. The child watches the bear until it's out of sight. That night, you tell your own story, not with words, but with the way your hands describe the tracks, the shape, the danger. The child listens closely, then mimics it. The others laugh, low and soft. The fire crackles. The stars blink above. You lie awake long after the others have gone quiet. You think of the bear, of the old man, of the goat's blood on the rock, of the child beside you who sleeps with one hand on his stone blade. You think of how you've changed, how the days blend now, not into monotony, but into something slow and sacred, a rhythm, a meaning. You do not know what day it is. You do not know how long you've lived like this, but you are no longer surviving, you are living. The morning fog hangs low, curling around your ankles as you step beyond the campfire's warmth. The smoke of last night's embers clings to your clothes, mixing with the smell of wet earth and moss. Somewhere deep in the trees, the birds have begun again, their calls sudden and strange after so many quiet days. Spring is tipping into summer now. The air is thicker. Each breath carries weight, as though even the atmosphere is learning to move differently. The group is slow to wake. The old woman stretches beneath her fur wrap, her bones groaning like bending branches. The child is already awake, crouched by the stream, trying to trap a water insect with a bent reed. You squat beside him, gesture for silence. You both watch the water's movement, the way it skips over rocks, the silver flash of a fish below. You speak without words, because the forest doesn't allow much noise, and neither of you needs it anymore. Decision is made to move again. The last goat meat is gone, and the berry bushes nearby have been stripped clean. You follow a ridge path high above a valley. From there, the world opens up like a giant's hand, lakes glittering in the distance, thick forests like dark green waves, smoke from fires you don't recognize rising miles away. You don't approach them. Not all fires are friends. You descend into a place the old woman seems to know well. She grunts approval when she sees the flat stones, the clear stream, the trees spaced just right to set traps between. She speaks a few broken sounds and gestures toward a hollow log. You and the child lift it together. Beneath it are beetles, mushrooms, and a nest of white, squirming grubs. Protein. No one flinches anymore. That night, the air is warm enough to sleep without fur. You lie beneath stars that seem brighter than before. The fire is small, flickering beside you, casting shadows on the trees. You hear the child breathing beside you. Steady, slow. The old woman hums again, a melody that feels older than any word you know. You don't join in this time. You just listen. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf howls. It sounds far away. The next day, while gathering roots, you find a pile of bones long, split, stripped clean. Not the work of your kind. No blades touch these. The group moves quickly, quietly. The fire is not lit that night. Cold is better than being seen. You sit in darkness, ears sharp, heart slow. Sleep comes in small pieces. A rustle in the grass wakes everyone. It's just wind. Maybe. No one says anything. The forest shifts as summer deepens. Flowers bloom and die within days. Insects sing constantly now, a shrill hum that never stops. The child covers his ears sometimes. You teach him how to pack moss to quiet the sound. You make fans from wide leaves. The heat clings to your skin like wet cloth. You sweat constantly. The river is your only relief. You soak your feet in it at dusk, watching the surface shimmer like liquid sky. A stranger arrives one day, tall, lean, face half covered with ash. He carries nothing but a broken spear. The group readies itself, but he doesn't approach. He stands at the edge of the trees, watching. Then he places his spear in the ground, backs away, and disappears. You wait. No one touches it for hours. Eventually, the old woman takes it. The point is still sharp. She sets it beside your pile of tools. Nothing is said. You explore further now, learning the terrain. You find a cliff face with handprints, newer than those seen before. Different people, still near. You mark a tree with a symbol only the child understands, just a bent line over a stone. A message not for others, but for yourselves. This place will be remembered. Food is harder again. A heat wave hits. The berries shrivel, streams dry. One member of the group collapses during a hunt. You carry her back. She wakes that night, but doesn't speak for days. You chew bark and spit it into her mouth, as you've seen the old woman do. Slowly, strength returns. She nods to you once. That is enough. Rain comes suddenly, furious. The sky cracks open and water pours down in great, icy sheets. You cover the fire with a stone bowl, but it's no use. It dies. Everyone huddles beneath overhangs and branches. You are soaked to the bone. The child shivers against you. You wrap him in your arms, whisper nothing, just hold. The storm lasts all night. When the sun returns, the forest is green again, greener than ever. Life blooms fast here, mushrooms, new insects, flowers bursting with color and then fading in hours. You walk through it all, spear in hand, eye scanning every movement. You catch 2 rabbits in a snare. The child dances when he sees them. That night, you roast them slowly, brushing them with crushed leaves to flavor the meat. The old woman takes the first bite. She smiles, small and tight. A rare thing. One morning, the child wakes you early, tugging your hand with a look of awe on his face. He leads you to a hollow tree. Inside, a beehive, glistening with honey. You know the risk. You show him how to use smoke slow, thin curls, made from moss and damp bark. The bees flee. You reach in, scoop the golden treasure into a carved bowl. You taste it together. It is unlike anything. Warm, sweet, ancient. That night, everyone eats some. It sticks to their fingers, their chins. Laughter, real laughter returns. For a moment, the Stone Age feels like paradise. But the earth always reminds you. The ground shakes slightly one morning. A tremble, not a roar, but enough to knock loose branches from trees. You feel it in the soles of your feet before you even see the others react, like the land is breathing in, holding, and waiting. The birds go silent. The child freezes, eyes wide, clinging to your arm. The old woman narrows her gaze, looking to the horizon like it might explain something. Then, slowly, the forest returns to its rhythm. But you've learned that the earth doesn't warn without reason. For the next few days, animals move strangely. Deer scatter at odd times. Wolves howl in daylight. You find a path of broken stones that didn't exist before, like something heavy rolled through. One morning, a thick column of black smoke rises far in the distance. Not your fire, not anyone's that you know. No one speaks of it, but everyone sees it. That night, you sleep with your spear across your chest. As summer wanes, the world shifts. Again, the leaves begin their slow turn to gold and rust. Nights grow cooler. You gather more each day: nuts, roots, dried meat, preparing without needing to be told. The child mimics you, storing things in bark bowls, lining them in moss. He's grown stronger, taller. He no longer stumbles over roots. He no longer flinches when sharpening bone. One evening, you climb a hill alone, just to see. The valley below is quiet. A ribbon of water winds through it, reflecting a sky already streaked with orange. You see smoke from your own fire far behind you, a comfort. Then you see movement on a distant ridge, figures, maybe a dozen, small against the horizon, watching. You do not call out. You do not move. You wait. They vanish as quickly as they appeared. You return and tell the old woman. She says nothing, but begins to move faster the next day. The group packs lightly. You shift your camp again, deeper into the forest. The trees here are denser, the ground covered in thick moss. The child sleeps closer now. Everyone does. The air feels tighter, heavier. Then something changes. The stars disappear one night. Not from clouds, but from smoke. Thick, heavy. You wake coughing. The sky above is red, even before the sun. A fire is near, a great one. The forest screams with the noise of animals fleeing, birds, rodents, even deer crashing through the underbrush. You grab the child, the old woman, your gear. You don't run, you move with purpose. Fast, alert. You do not look back. The forest behind you glows orange. The air is thick. The group spreads out, but not too far. You stay near the stream. Water is safety. You follow it until the smoke thins, until the sky returns, until you can breathe again. You do not stop until your legs tremble. That night, no fire is lit. You eat cold roots in silence. The child holds your hand for the first time in many days, not from fear, but from knowing, from remembering that the world is vast, that it burns, that it gives and takes. Days pass. You find a new place, higher ground, water nearby, game trails crisscrossing the area. You settle in slowly, build simple lean-tos with bent branches. You start the fire with flint and dry moss. The old woman watches but doesn't help. Her hands are slower now, her breath shallower. You notice, but she never complains. One evening, she asks the child for a bowl of water. Then she calls you to sit beside her. She hums a low tune, one you've heard before. Then, for the first time in moons, she speaks. Only a few words. You don't understand all of them, but the meaning is clear. Watch him. She means the child. She lays back. Her eyes remain open, but distant. The firelight dances on her face. She breathes once, twice, then no more. The child says nothing, but his shoulders tremble. You place your arm around him and say nothing to Dot. In the morning, you carry her to a quiet hill. You dig with sticks, stone, and hands. The group gathers. You wrap her in leaves and lay her down. The child places a painted rock on her chest, one you'd seen him work on for days. It bears the mark she always scratched into bark, a spiral. You cover her slowly, carefully, and when you leave, you do not look back. That night, you tell the child a story, one the old woman once told, about a bear and a man. You mimic the sounds. You draw shapes in the dirt. He laughs quietly and listens. The season is shifting again. And now, so are you. You are the guide now. You are the firekeeper. You are the memory carrier. And the Stone Age moves forward through you. Autumn deepens. The trees that once offered fruit now release only leaves. A quiet rain of orange and brown that crunches beneath your feet with every step. The world softens at the edges, light becomes more golden, shadows longer. The forest quiets. Even the birds call less now, and with each passing day, you feel the approach of cold once more, not as a threat, but as a returning presence, an old beast you've faced before. You prepare without being told. The memory of last winter lives in your bones. You gather, not just for tonight, but for the days you can already feel curling toward you through the trees. The child works beside you, swift and capable. He no longer needs instruction for most things. He builds snares, sharpens blades, sorts roots. He hums the old woman's melody sometimes without knowing it, fingers tapping to the beat as he works. Her presence remains. A new shelter is built deeper, sturdier, braced with thick logs and packed earth. You line the inside with dried grasses, furs, and bark to keep the wind out. The fire ring is rebuilt in the center, carefully encircled, with stones to hold in the heat. The group works as one now. No one leads, no one follows. You are simply one body with many limbs, moving with practiced rhythm. You hunt longer and farther. The animals are leaner now, preparing for their own hardships. Some days, you catch little, others, a windfall. You down a young elk one evening, a long, exhausting chase that leaves your limbs aching and your hands red with effort. The meat is heavy, but you carry it with the help of two others. When you return, the child runs to you, not with excitement but with readiness. He helps clean the kill. He skins with the stone knife nearly as well as you do. And when the fire crackles and the meat sizzles, he watches it with the seriousness that echoes your own. That night, as everyone eats slowly, you speak again. Just a few words, simple ones. You point to the stars and name them not because you know their names, but because you give them meaning. The child repeats after you. Others listen. Some nod. You feel it's something built in your muscles, but in the space between you all. A language. A way of holding memories that can last longer than a breath or a season. You wake in the middle of the night, one evening, to silence so complete it presses against your ears. The fire has gone out. The stars are hidden. The child stirs beside you, sensing your movement. You step outside the shelter and look up. Fog clings to the trees. There's a faint sound, then a breath, not yours. You grip your spear. From the dark, a figure appears. Tall, cloaked in furs, their face marked with dark pigment. Not from your group. Alone. They raise both hands. You lower your spear slightly. Behind you, others stir. The child stands behind your leg. The figure does not speak. Instead, they kneel slowly and place something on the ground, a wrapped bundle. Then they turn and vanish into the fog. You approach the bundle carefully. Inside, dried meat, a woven cord, and a shell carved with strange marks, a gift, or a message. You do not know which. You keep it. The days grow shorter. The cold bites deeper. Frost creeps into the edges of leaves, into the cracks of wood. You light the fire earlier each day. The shelter is sealed tighter. You move less. You store more. The rhythms of life have slowed. Everything is measured now. Every movement, every sound, every piece of food. The child falls ill one morning. Not badly. A fever. You crush roots, brew bark in water, press moss to his forehead. He sleeps beside the fire while the others tend the camp. You keep watch. His breath rattles. You whisper the old woman's song without realizing it. And when his eyes open again, hours later, you smile not with your mouth, but with the soft release of air from your chest. He's still with you. As the freeze comes, so does the stillness. You spend more hours by the fire, telling stories with hands and signs. You teach the child how to tell them too. You create new symbols in the dirt, marks that mean animal, hunt, rain, fire. He copies them onto bark. Your stories move from breath into form. The group watches, learns, adds their own. Snow falls again, gentle at first, then heavier. The world goes white. But this time, you are ready. Your shelter holds strong. The fire never dies. The food is enough. This time, you do not fear the cold. You sit with the child beside you, watching the snow drift outside. He speaks. A word you haven't heard before. Something like a name. You look at him. He points to the sky, then to his chest. Then he says it again. Maybe it's his name, Or maybe it's yours. It doesn't matter. The sound lingers in the air like smoke. You repeat it. He smiles. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the fire keeps burning. And the story continues. The world is white and silent once more. The snow lays heavy on every branch, every shelter, every exposed surface of your life. It hushes the sounds of footsteps, swallows voices, and turns your breath into clouds that vanish the moment they're born. But this year, the quiet is not so fearsome. It's familiar. It has rhythm. It has pattern. You've come to understand winter as a living thing, unforgiving, yes, but not unknowable. You've taught the child how to read snow the way others read smoke or footprints. You crouch together outside the shelter, studying the way a hare's prints stop beneath a low bush, how a fox's path winds close to your camp before doubling back. The child traces them with a stick, not speaking, just watching you, learning how each curve means movement, each space between means speed. You nod silently. He nods back. Inside, the fire is a soft heart beating in the cold. Its smoke curls upward and out the shelter's vent hole, drifting lazily into the gray sky. The group stays close now. Everything is shared: food, stories, silence. There is a closeness that comes only in hardship. You feel it in the way people breathe together now, the way shoulders brush in sleep, the way even the smallest tasks, grinding seeds, stretching hides, are done side by side. The carved shell left by the stranger still sits on a ledge of stone beside the fire. No one has touched it since you placed it there, but everyone looks at it from time to time. The symbols on it are strange, but their meaning is felt. A reminder that others walk this world, that you are not alone in it, even when you cannot see them. One night, a storm rises so suddenly that the shelter groans beneath its weight. Snow piles high against the windward side, and the fire dims to a low glow. You press your body against the wall, reinforcing it with your weight. Others do the same. You feel the structure breathe beneath you, as if alive. The child curls against your chest, eyes closed but tense. You hum again, not from fear, but to keep the air inside calm. When morning comes, the storm has passed. A thick silence lays across everything. You push open the shelter's flap, and the snow falls in a soft wave, burying your feet. Outside, the world is smoothed clean. Trees bow under their burdens. The sun, faint and pale, reflects off every surface like a second sky underfoot. You step out slowly, reverently, eking deep tracks behind you. The child follows. You dig paths, uncover your tools, break the frozen layer from the stream to collect water. The days pass slowly, wrapped in cold and smoke. You tell stories each night, some remembered, some invented. The child begins telling his own, pantomiming hunts and storms, giving voice to the wind, shape to fire. His hands move like yours now, his voice rising with confidence. The group watches. Some even add their own parts. The fire listens to all of it, and then change.it comes not with thunder, but with scent. One morning, the wind shifts. There's a hint of something green, distant, but real. The child notices first. He sniffs the air and runs outside, calling to you. You follow. Beneath the snow, the ground is softening. The ice on the stream is thinner. The birds return, not many, but a few. Their song is rough, broken, but bright. You begin to prepare again, not for survival, but for motion. The world is waking, and so must you. The group gathers what's left of the winter stores, patches their cloaks and sandals, sharpens every edge. You dig out your woven pouches, your slings, your flint. The fire no longer needs to burn constantly. It rests now, between meals. As the sun grows bold again, the child finds a patch of green beneath a melting drift, new growth, tender and small. He brings it to you with both hands, careful not to crush it. You hold it, smell it, smile. Life again. One by one, the group rises with the days. You begin walking, slowly at first, following old paths. Some are gone, erased by storms or time. Others remain. The trees look different now, not barren, but waiting. The streams trickle louder. You pass familiar stones, places of memory. The Old woman's resting hill. The ravine where you brought down the goat. The cliff with the fading handprints. You leave a new mark there. Your own hand, painted in ash and spit and crushed root. Beside it, the child presses his smaller fingers, spread wide. You look at him. He looks at you. You nod. He smiles. You walk on. The world opens again. Green pushing up through white. Birds returning in bursts. Animals moving in pairs. One evening, you see smoke in the distance, thin and straight. Not fire lost in the forest, but fire kept. You do not hide. You approach carefully. Another group. Older faces. New faces. Some recognize you. The shell you carry is shown. They nod. There are no fights. Only shared warmth. That night, both groups sit together. Fires ring the clearing. Meat turns on spits. Children play in the mud. You sit with the child beside you. He tells his story again, this time to new ears. He is confident. You are quiet. You watch the sky. The stars are bright again. You sleep deeply that night, not with one eye open, not with a spear across your chest, but with your arms open, your back to the ground, your face to the stars. In the morning, you rise and walk forward, not as a survivor, but as a people, as a shadow in history, but as the beginning of it. The Stone Age is not past. It is inside you now. You were never just trying to last a day in it. You became it. And now, you carry it forward. The morning began with mist curling low over the damp grass, soft and gray like breath exhaled from the lungs of the sleeping earth. You rose quietly with the others, not to the sound of commands or urgency, but to the slow unfolding of light. Across the leaves, the fire had burned low through the night, reduced to warm coals nestled in a cradle of ash. Around it, the group stirred in silence, gathering their scattered belongings with practiced motions. There was no rush, no call, just motion, a collective knowing that it was time to move. You adjusted the woven pack on your shoulder, feeling the gentle press of moss-wrapped, flint and bark-bundled food against your back. The child walked a few paces behind you, now not out of rebellion, but independence. His face, once so quick to turn to you for instruction, now looked forward, reading the land like a story he already knew. His fingers brushed the tops of tall grass as he walked, and every so often, he would stoop to inspect a beetle or lift a stone. The bone pendant he had carved, the one shaped like the moon, rested against his chest, worn smooth now by sun and skin. The path ahead was not marked by signs, yet it existed, etched into the soil by generations of quiet passing. You could feel it more than see it. The land itself seemed to remember the pressure of ancient feet. The forest canopy above let in thin streaks of golden light, and birds chirped in rhythms that sounded like conversations. Each step forward was not a push, but a pull, as if the world was inviting you deeper. As the sun climbed higher, the mist burned off, revealing the full colors of the forest. The leaves shimmered with leftover droplets. Fungi bloomed in shadows, like tiny, vivid suns. A deer stood still among the trees, watching you, its breath visible in the cool air. No one made a move. The group passed slowly, reverently, acknowledging the animal without disturbing it. It turned and disappeared, as silent as it had come. By midday, you found water, a wide, shallow stream curling lazily through polished stones. The group stopped there to rest. You knelt beside the current, letting it flow over your hands, the coldness stinging but cleansing. The others filled hollowed gourds and birch containers. The children threw pebbles. One of the women laughed softly when a splash hit her arm. It was a gentle, easy moment. There had been fewer of those before. Now, they came more often, not because life had grown easier, but because you had grown stronger. After the meal, dried meat, cracked nuts, and the last of the preserved berries, you gathered your tools again. The journey continued upriver. The land began to rise gradually, the trees thinning into scrubby brush and scattered rocks. The air smelled different here, less of wet earth, more of open sky. The group's pace adjusted. You walked more slowly, with deeper steps, aware of the shift beneath your feet. In the late afternoon, the boy called out, not with panic, but clarity. He had found something. You moved to his side and saw it. A series of stones arranged in a circle, weathered and sunken into the ground. Not natural, placed, ancient. The others gathered slowly, examining the sight in silence. The tall woman with the painted chin knelt beside one stone and touched its edge. There were marks, faint grooves, nearly erased by time, but deliberate. Stories, perhaps. Symbols. Maybe both. No one spoke for a long while. Then, without instruction, the group began to gather wood. A new fire was built, not for warmth, not for cooking, but for honoring. The flames were low and steady, casting flickering light over the stone circle as dusk approached. You all sat around it. Someone began to hum an old tune, older than memory. One by one, others joined. It became a wordless song, made only of breath and vibration, a sound that rose and fell like wind in the trees. The boy sat beside you. He leaned his shoulder gently against yours, and you didn't speak. You didn't need to. In the firelight, his face was calm. He belonged here now, not just to the group, but to the rhythm of the earth. His eyes watched the flames the way your ancestors might have watched the stars, searching for meaning, but content with the glow. That night, you slept beneath the open sky, the fire still burning, a guardian through dreams. The stars above were sharp and endless, the air filled with the soft sounds of breath and the occasional rustle of leaves. No one feared, no one stood guard. The land itself seemed to hold you. At dawn, the group rose slowly, stretching in the golden light. The fire was out, its smoke trailing upward like memory. You left the stones as you had found them, placing a fresh handful of wildflowers in the center. A gesture, a whisper across time. The journey continued upward, into higher ground where the trees returned, gnarled and wind-bent. Here, the air was thinner, the birds more sparse, but the views wide and humbling. You came upon a rocky outcrop and paused to look. Below, the forest stretched for days, a green ocean rippling with life. Beyond it, distant mountains stood like sleeping gods. The boy stared in silence. Then he smiled. You made camp that night in a small valley ringed by tall grass and stones. The group was quiet, not from weariness, but from awe. The world was bigger than any of you had imagined. You were part of something old, something that pulls beneath the soil and within your veins. Around the fire, you shared a new story, not from the past, but from the journey. The boy told of the stone circle. A girl described the deer by the stream. The tall woman shared a dream she had while sleeping under the stars. You listened, adding nothing, content to witness. As the flames flickered, the boy turned to you and asked, "How will we know when it's time to stop walking?" You smiled and said, "The earth will tell us," and you believed it. The next days passed like wind over grass, light, steady, unnoticed until the change. The forest thinned again, giving way to high meadows where flowers bloomed in bright, impossible colors. You found water in a cold spring that tasted like stone and sky. Food was harder here. The group hunted in pairs, snaring rabbits and birds, fishing in the deeper pools. Hunger returned, not as threat, but as teacher. It reminded you to move, to listen, to adapt. One evening, while foraging for roots, the boy called you again. This time, his voice was different, excited, urgent. You followed his path through the ferns until you saw it. A cave. Hidden behind a curtain of vines, it opened like a mouth into the hillside. Inside, it was cool and still, the air thick with age. You lit a small flame and stepped inside. The walls were covered in markings, painted figures, animal shapes, handprints, layers upon layers, some nearly erased by time, others bold and recent. You reached out and touched a red circle near the entrance, its edges still sharp. Someone had been here not long ago. Perhaps they still were. You turned to the boy. He was staring at a row of figures dancing around a flame. Without speaking, he took a piece of charcoal from the pouch at his side and added a mark. A new figure, tall and thin, holding a spear. He looked at you and smiled. You added your own mark beside his, a spiral within a handprint. Together, you left the cave as the sky turned violet. That night, The group gathered close. You shared the discovery not with excitement, but reverence. Another place, another voice. You were not alone in the world. Others walked it, others remembered. The story deepened, and the stars looked down, blinking slowly, like eyes that had watched all this before. The wind changed the next morning, subtle, but sure. It came from the west, dry and cool, bringing with it the scent of stone and dust. It was the kind of wind that whispered of faraway places, of valleys unseen and rivers unwalked. The elders in the group paused to notice it. You watched their faces tilt slightly to the breeze, eyes narrowing, as if listening to a message only the old could understand. There was no discussion. The path shifted. You moved west. For 3 days, the group followed the wind. It wound you through narrow gullies, across ridgelines where the earth fell away sharply on either side, and through dense thickets where brambles clung to your legs and arms like questions. You found no new cave, no tribe, no threat. But the land itself changed. The trees grew taller, darker, their trunks wrapped in moss thick enough to hide a hand. The ground felt spongy beneath your feet. Mushrooms bloomed in clusters like moons that had fallen to earth. At night, the forest sang in tones unfamiliar, strange insects chirping in rhythms you had never heard. On the 4th day, the trees gave way to a clearing. In its center stood a standing stone, alone, taller than a man, and shaped like a blade. Its surface was covered in deep carvings, spirals and crosses and jagged lines. Around its base, the grass was flattened, not trampled, but as if it had chosen to bow. You did not speak. No one did. The group encircled the stone, standing at respectful distance. The boy approached first. He knelt beside the base and ran his fingers along the grooves, whispering to himself words you could not hear. Then he stood and stepped back. One by one, each person followed, touching or bowing or simply looking. When your turn came, you laid both palms flat against the cool stone and closed your eyes. You heard nothing, saw nothing, but you felt something. Weight, a memory, a presence, not of gods, but of people, of time. The group camped nearby that night, under a moon that had turned thin and sharp. You did not build a fire. Instead, you sat in a wide circle around the standing stone, speaking softly, telling stories, not from the present, but from before, of the first hunt, of the great storm, of the broken foot that healed with river herbs. The children listened, wide-eyed, clutching pieces of bone and bark. The boy leaned against your side again, not from fear, but from belonging. That night, your dream was deep and vivid. You stood in a forest with no trees, only the shapes of them like smoke or shadow. The wind moved in spirals, tugging gently at your arms. In front of you was a path of light, made from fireflies, leading toward a hill that rose impossibly high. You followed it, your feet bare, the earth soft and warm. At the top there was a fire. Around it sat people, dozens, hundreds, maybe more, all watching, all silent. One of them lifted a hand and pointed to your chest. You looked down and saw the spiral. When you woke, the sun was already high. The boy was watching you. You dreamed, he said. You nodded. So did I, he replied. But I think it was the same dream. You said nothing, just placed a hand on his shoulder. The group moved again that morning, this time following a narrow trail that led downhill through thick ferns and gnarled trees. The air was heavy, wet, filled with the scent of moss and blooming things. The further you walked, the more the land began to whisper, not in voices, but in signs. Claw marks on bark, stones stacked in twos, a feather placed perfectly in the fork of a branch. Someone had passed this way. By the second day, you heard them, not clearly, just echoes. Laughter, singing. For off, you slowed the group, kept to the trees, observed. At the crest of a ridge, you saw them at last, a camp in a sunlit clearing, filled with people, small fires, woven shelters. Children ran among the trees, women pounded roots, men stripped bark for cord. No weapons were drawn, no fear, just life. The boy tugged at your side. Do we go? He asked. You did not answer. Instead, You stepped forward. Slowly, visibly, you raised your empty hands. From the camp, a tall figure rose and mirrored your gesture. The boy stepped beside you, then others, and soon, the two groups were walking toward each other, cautiously, slowly, like animals meeting at a water's edge. But there was no growl, no warning, only a nod. An offering, a beginning. That night, two fires burned beside one another, two circles, two stories, and in the space between them, a new language began to form, not of words, but of eyes, of gesture, of shared bread and silent understanding. The boy sat beside a girl with wild hair and painted arms. They did not speak, but they exchanged tools, showing each other the weight and shape of their waists. You sat beside the tall figure, who was a man with a voice like wind through reeds. He told you of the southern rains, of the white bird that visited only in winter, of the tree that bled red sap when wounded. You listened, and when he was done, you told him of the spiral, of the cave, of the standing stone. His eyes widened. He touched the mark on your chest with reverence. In the days that followed, the groups merged slowly, not in name, but in rhythm. A new camp formed, shaped not like one group's or the others, but something in between. Fires burned and shared rings. Children played with new friends. Tools were exchanged. Songs braided together. The land did not reject this union. The birds sang louder. The roots grew sweeter, and the wind no longer wandered. It circled. The spiral returned, and it lived. Not in caves, but in hearts. The morning began with mist curling low over the damp grass, soft and gray like breath exhaled from the lungs of the sleeping earth. You rose quietly with the others, not to the sound of commands or urgency, but to the slow unfolding of light. Across the leaves, the fire had burned low through the night, reduced to warm coals nestled in a cradle of ash. Around it, the group stirred in silence, gathering their scattered belongings with practiced motions. There was no rush, no call, just motion, a collective knowing that it was time to move. You adjusted the woven pack on your shoulder, feeling the gentle press of moss-wrapped, flint and bark-bundled food against your back. The child walked a few paces behind you now, not out of rebellion, but independence. His face, once so quick to turn to you for instruction, now looked forward, reading the land like a story he already knew. His fingers brushed the tops of tall grass as he walked, and every so often, he would stoop to inspect a beetle or lift a stone. The bone pendant he had carved, the one shaped like the moon, rested against his chest, worn smooth now by sun and skin. The path ahead was not marked by signs, yet it existed, etched into the soil by generations of quiet passing. You could feel it more than see it. The land itself seemed to remember the pressure of ancient feet. The forest canopy above let in thin streaks of golden light, and birds chirped in rhythms that sounded like conversations. Each step forward was not a push, but a pull, as if the world was inviting you deeper. As the sun climbed higher, the mist burned off, revealing the full colors of the forest. The leaves shimmered with leftover droplets. Fungi bloomed in shadows, like tiny, vivid suns. A deer stood still among the trees, watching you, its breath visible in the cool air. No one made a move. The group passed slowly, reverently, acknowledging the animal without disturbing it. It turned and disappeared, as silent as it had come. By midday, you found water, a wide, shallow stream curling lazily through polished stones. The group stopped there to rest. You knelt beside the current, letting it flow over your hands, the coldness stinging but cleansing. The others filled hollowed gourds and birch containers. The children threw pebbles. One of the women laughed softly when a splash hit her arm. It was a gentle, easy moment. There had been fewer of those before. Now, they came more often, not because life had grown easier, but because you had grown stronger. After the meal, dried meat, cracked nuts, and the last of the preserved berries, you gathered your tools again. The journey continued upriver. The land began to rise gradually, the trees thinning into scrubby brush and scattered rocks. The air smelled different here, less of wet earth, more of open sky. The group's pace adjusted. You walked more slowly, with deeper steps, aware of the shift beneath your feet. In the late afternoon, The boy called out not with panic, but clarity. He had found something. You moved to his side and saw it. A series of stones arranged in a circle, weathered and sunken into the ground. Not natural, placed, ancient. The others gathered slowly, examining the sight in silence. The tall woman with the painted chin knelt beside one stone and touched its edge. There were marks, faint grooves, nearly erased by time, but deliberate. Stories, perhaps. Symbols, maybe both. No one spoke for a long while. Then, without instruction, the group began to gather wood. A new fire was built, not for warmth, not for cooking, but for honoring. The flames were low and steady, casting flickering light over the stone circle as dusk approached. You all sat around it. Someone began to hum an old tune, older than memory. One by one, others joined. It became a wordless song, made only of breath and vibration, a sound that rose and fell like wind in the trees. The boy sat beside you. He leaned his shoulder gently against yours, and you didn't speak. You didn't need to. In the firelight, his face was calm. He belonged here now, not just to the group, but to the rhythm of the earth. His eyes watched the flames the way your ancestors might have watched the stars, searching for meaning, but content with the glow. That night, you slept beneath the open sky, the fire still burning, a guardian through dreams. The stars above were sharp and endless, the air filled with the soft sounds of breath and the occasional rustle of leaves. No one feared, no one stood guard. The land itself seemed to hold you. At dawn, the group rose slowly, stretching in the golden light. The fire was out, its smoke trailing upward like memory. You left the stones as you had found them, placing a fresh handful of wildflowers in the center. A gesture, a whisper across time. The journey continued upward, into higher ground where the trees returned, gnarled and wind-bent. Here, the air was thinner, the birds more sparse, but the views wide and humbling. You came upon a rocky outcrop and paused to look. Below, the forest stretched for days, a green ocean rippling with life. Beyond it, distant mountains stood like sleeping gods. The boy stared in silence. Then he smiled. You made camp that night in a small valley ringed by tall grass and stones. The group was quiet, not from weariness, but from awe. The world was bigger than any of you had imagined. You were part of something old, something that pulls beneath the soil and within your veins. Around the fire, you shared a new story, not from the past, but from the journey. The boy told of the stone circle. A girl described the deer by the stream. The tall woman shared a dream she had while sleeping under the stars. You listened, adding nothing, content to witness. As the flames flickered, the boy turned to you and asked, "How will we know when it's time to stop walking?" You smiled and said, "The earth will tell us," and you believed it. The next days passed like wind over grass, light, steady, unnoticed until the change. The forest thinned again, giving way to high meadows where flowers bloomed in bright, impossible colors. You found water in a cold spring that tasted like stone and sky. Food was harder here. The group hunted in pairs, snaring rabbits and birds, fishing in the deeper pools. Hunger returned, not as threat, but as teacher. It reminded you to move, to listen, to adapt. One evening, while foraging for roots, the boy called you again. This time, his voice was different, excited, urgent. You followed his path through the ferns until you saw it. A cave. Hidden behind a curtain of vines, it opened like a mouth into the hillside. Inside, it was cool and still, the air thick with age. You lit a small flame and stepped inside. The walls were covered in markings, painted figures, animal shapes, handprints, layers upon layers, some nearly erased by time, others bold and recent. You reached out and touched a red circle near the entrance, its edges still sharp. Someone had been here not long ago. Perhaps they still were. You turned to the boy. He was staring at a row of figures dancing around a flame. Without speaking, he took a piece of charcoal from the pouch at his side and added a mark. A new figure, tall and thin, holding a spear. He looked at you and smiled. You added your own mark beside his, a spiral within a handprint. Together, you left the cave as the sky turned violet, That night, the group gathered close. You shared the discovery not with excitement, but reverence. Another place, another voice. You were not alone in the world. Others walked it, others remembered. The story deepened, and the stars looked down, blinking slowly, like eyes that had watched all this before. The wind changed the next morning, subtle, but sure. It came from the west, dry and cool, bringing with it the scent of stone and dust. It was the kind of wind that whispered of faraway places, of valleys unseen and rivers unwalked. The elders in the group paused to notice it. You watched their faces tilt slightly to the breeze, eyes narrowing, as if listening to a message only the old could understand. There was no discussion. The path shifted. You moved west. For 3 days, the group followed the wind. It wound you through narrow gullies, across ridgelines where the earth fell away sharply on either side, and through dense thickets where brambles clung to your legs and arms like questions. You found no new cave, no tribe, no threat. But the land itself changed. The trees grew taller, darker, their trunks wrapped in moss thick enough to hide a hand. The ground felt spongy beneath your feet. Mushrooms bloomed in clusters like moons that had fallen to earth. At night, the forest sang in tones unfamiliar, strange insects chirping in rhythms you had never heard. On the 4th day, the trees gave way to a clearing. In its center stood a standing stone, alone, taller than a man and shaped like a blade. Its surface was covered in deep carvings, spirals and crosses and jagged lines. Around its base, the grass was flattened, not trampled, but as if it had chosen to bow. You did not speak. No one did. The group encircled the stone, standing at respectful distance. The boy approached first. He knelt beside the base and ran his fingers along the grooves, whispering to himself words you could not hear. Then he stood and stepped back. One by one, each person followed, touching or bowing or simply looking. When your turn came, you laid both palms flat against the cool stone and closed your eyes. You heard nothing, saw nothing, but you felt something. Weight, a memory, a presence, not of gods, but of people, of time. The group camped nearby that night, under a moon that had turned thin and sharp. You did not build a fire. Instead, you sat in a wide circle around the standing stone, speaking softly, telling stories, not from the present, but from before, of the first hunt, of the great storm, of the broken foot that healed with river herbs. The children listened wide-eyed, clutching pieces of bone and bark. The boy leaned against your side again, not from fear, but from belonging. That night, your dream was deep and vivid. You stood in a forest with no trees, only the shapes of them like smoke or shadow. The wind moved in spirals, tugging gently at your arms. In front of you was a path of light, made from fireflies, leading toward a hill that rose impossibly high. You followed it, your feet bare, the earth soft and warm. At the top, there was a fire. Around it sat people, dozens, hundreds, maybe more, all watching, all silent. One of them lifted a hand and pointed to your chest. You looked down and saw the spiral. When you woke, the sun was already high. The boy was watching you. You dreamed, he said. You nodded. So did I, he replied. But I think it was the same dream. You said nothing, just placed a hand on his shoulder. The group moved again that morning, this time following a narrow trail that led downhill through thick ferns and gnarled trees. The air was heavy, wet, filled with the scent of moss and blooming things. The further you walked, the more the land began to whisper, not in voices, but in signs. Claw marks on bark, stones stacked in twos, a feather placed perfectly in the fork of a branch. Someone had passed this way. By the second day, you heard them, not clearly, just echoes. Laughter, singing. For off, you slowed the group, kept to the trees, observed. At the crest of a ridge, you saw them at last, a camp in a sunlit clearing, filled with people, small fires, woven shelters. Children ran among the trees, women pounded roots, men stripped bark for cord. No weapons were drawn, no fear, just life. The boy tugged at your side. Do we go? He asked, You did not answer. Instead, you stepped forward. Slowly, visibly, you raised your empty hands. From the camp, a tall figure rose and mirrored your gesture. The boy stepped beside you, then others, and soon, the two groups were walking toward each other, cautiously, slowly, like animals meeting at a water's edge. But there was no growl, no warning, only a nod. Offering, a beginning. That night, two fires burned beside one another, two circles, two stories, and in the space between them, a new language began to form, not of words, but of eyes, of gesture, of shared bread and silent understanding. The boy sat beside a girl with wild hair and painted arms. They did not speak, but they exchanged tools, showing each other the weight and shape of their waists. You sat beside the tall figure, who was a man with a voice like wind through reeds. He told you of the southern rains, of the white bird that visited only in winter, of the tree that bled red sap when wounded. You listened, and when he was done, you told him of the spiral of the cave, of the standing stone. His eyes widened. He touched the mark on your chest with reverence. In the days that followed, the groups merged slowly, not in name, but in rhythm. A new camp formed, shaped not like one group's or the others, but something in between. Fires burned and shared rings. Children played with new friends. Tools were exchanged. Songs braided together. The land did not reject this union. The birds sang louder. The roots grew sweeter, and the wind no longer wandered. It circled. The spiral returned, and it lived, not in caves, but in hearts. The wind shifted again, this time not as a signal of change, but as a gentle breath from the heart of the earth itself. It moved softly through the tall grasses, over the weathered stone, across the woven shelters that now dotted the open space. Like fallen stars, the two groups, once strangers, had begun to move not as separate lines, but as one spiral, curling slowly inward toward each other. There was no ceremony, no declaration, only the quiet joining of footsteps and the slow weaving of stories. Each day began with silence, not the silence of absence, but the kind that comes when people listen to the land. You rose early, before the birds began their songs, and walked to the edge of the trees. The ground there was damp with morning dew, and your breath was visible in the soft light. You stood for a moment, feeling the coolness on your skin, the scent of pine in your nose, and the pulse of life all around you. Behind you, the camp stirred quietly, no words, just the sound of hands brushing against hide, of water being lifted from shallow pots, of children yawning into sleep-warmed blankets. The boy came to you not long after. He had taken to carrying a curved stick, smoothed by stone, and sharpened on one edge. It was not a weapon, but a tool, half staff, half spade, made for digging roots or breaking earth. He had carved his own marks into its handle, 3 short lines and a spiral. He no longer waited for instruction. He simply came, nodded, and walked beside you into the trees. You gathered wild onions near the marsh edge that morning, their scent sharp and sweet as you pulled them from the soil. The boy found mushrooms growing in the shade beneath fallen logs. He paused before picking them, examining the gills beneath the caps, rubbing a bit of the cap against his wrist to test for sting or stain. You watched him quietly, proud not in his independence, but in his patience. When you returned to camp, the others were already busy. The tall man from the southern tribe had constructed a smoke tent using hide and hot stones. Inside, thin strips of meat hung from bent sticks, the scent rising in slow, steady plumes that curled into the air like offerings. 2 women, one from each tribe, sat together grinding nuts into powder, laughing softly as their children played with hollowed bones nearby. A boy no older than 5 held up a smooth stone and shouted something in a mix of both tongues. The older children mimicked him, laughing, repeating his nonsense word until it became something meaningful, a new name for the stone, made from both histories. Language was not being taught. It was growing, like moss across stone. You sat near the fire pit with the elders later that day. They were arranging stones and patterns, some familiar, some new. One elder from your people placed a large white rock at the center. Another, from theirs, added 3 black ones in a triangle around it. No one spoke, yet each person understood the symbols forming between their hands. The arrangement was not random. It was a map, not of land, but of memory. As the sun reached its highest point, a call rose from the edge of camp. A young hunter had spotted tracks boar, heading toward the ridge. The group assembled quickly. Spears were gathered, slings checked. You joined them, as did the boy. His eyes were bright, focused, but not reckless. He had hunted before, but this time he was part of a larger whole, not just the shadow behind your steps. The hunt took you up the ridge, through bramble and root, until the air thinned and the canopy opened to bare sky. The boar was clever, weaving through thickets and circling back on itself. But the hunters were patient. They fanned out, not chasing, but guiding, herding it without force. When the final moment came, it was swift. A spear thrown from a careful hand found its mark. The animal fell, not with a scream, but a thud. There was no cheer, no shouting, only a moment of stillness. The boy stepped forward and placed his hand on the boar's head. He whispered something, words you didn't catch. Then he turned and nodded. The hunters carried the body back with care. The women were already preparing the fire. Children were told stories about boars, of their strength, their stubbornness, their place in the world. The meat was shared evenly. The bones set aside for tools, the hide for water bags. Nothing wasted. That night, the fire burned higher than usual, not in celebration, but in remembrance. The two oldest members of each tribe stood beside it, their hands raised. One spoke of the stars, how they moved like spirits across the sky. The other spoke of the underworld, where ancestors waited in dreams. As they spoke, others joined in, not as echo, but as rhythm. The story grew, taking shape not from one voice, but many. The boy sat beside the girl with the painted arms. They drew symbols in the dirt, copying those from the cave, inventing others. You watched them, and for the first time, you felt something rise in your chest, not pride, not even joy, but peace. A long, deep peace, as though the land itself had finally exhaled. In the days that followed, the camp became more than a place to rest. It became a point in the world, a marker not of territory, but of time. Stones were arranged into paths. Tall sticks were placed at the edges, carved with both languages. Songs were created not to remember the past, but to honor the moment. One afternoon, the boy came to you with the question, "Will we leave this place?" You looked at the sky, the shape of the mountains beyond, the curve of the river wrapping around the camp like a protective arm. Eventually, you said, "But why?" He asked. You took a breath. "Because that's what we are, not rooted like trees, but moving like wind. We carry the land with us, in our feet, in our fire." He was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. "Then I'll remember it. All of it." You smiled. "That's the way." The nights grew longer after that, the air colder. A season was shifting again. Birds began to move overhead in great arcs. The sky turned more silver, the stars closer. You knew it was almost time to move, but before that, there was one more task. The cave. The boy asked to return. Not alone, but not with the whole group either. Just you, and the girl with the painted arms, and the tall man from the south. A circle of 4. You walked at dawn, through the old path, past the river's bend, beneath the trees that had watched you before. The cave mouth was still there, and changed. Inside, the air held its memory. You brought fresh pigment this time, ochre, charcoal, crushed berries. You added new marks. The boy painted a spiral around his earlier figure. The girl added birds in flight. The man etched waves at the edge. And you, finally, placed your whole palm on the wall, then pulled it away, leaving only the outline, a hollow hand, open and reaching. You stayed until dark, then returned in silence. When the group left the camp a few days later, there were no goodbyes, only soft footsteps, moving forward. The land did not mourn. It waited for the next return. The sun broke through the trees with the gentleness of fingers parting a curtain, casting long shadows over the moving figures below. The group moved as one now, not in a line, but in a shape that shifted, flowed, and breathed like a living thing. Each person knew their place. Each step felt chosen. There was no leader, no follower, only rhythm. You walked near the front, your feet familiar with the feeling of uneven ground, the way dew-soaked grass clings to ankles. The boy was just behind, walking not directly in your steps, but beside them, parallel. He was no longer learning. He was remembering. The path you were on had been walked before, even if no tracks remained. You passed over high ridges and into shallow valleys. You forded small rivers with stones cold against your soles, then dried your legs in the warm air beyond. The seasons had turned softly. The trees had begun to shift color, not a sudden burst of flame, but a slow bleeding from green to gold, from gold to rust. The leaves loosened their grip on the branches, drifting down like old thoughts ready to be released. You camped that evening near a ring of tall stones, older than any you had seen. Not carved, not arranged, just standing, watching. The group built no fire. They cooked no food. They sat around the stones in a wide circle and listened. The wind moved between the rocks, creating a low, singing hum. A child leaned her head against her mother's leg and fell asleep with her eyes open, staring into the dusk. That night, you dreamed of snow, not falling, but melting, of trees without roots, a fire that made no smoke, and when you woke, the boy was already sitting up, staring at the horizon. The stars were still visible, fading slowly as dawn approached. I heard something, he said. What did it say? You asked. He was quiet for a long time. Then, keep going. You did. The next days carried you into a region of hills that looked like the backs of sleeping animals. They rose and fell gently, each covered in tall grass that waved in the wind. Like water. Here, the earth was soft and quiet, holding your footprints just long enough to remember them, then letting go. In the distance, you began to see smoke. Not from fire, but from heat, the ground itself exhaling. Sulfur, steam, pools of water that shimmered with strange colors. The land spoke in ways you had never heard. It hissed, it sighed, it bubbled. You told the group to stop. Not out of fear, but respect. The oldest among you stepped forward, eyes closed, inhaling deeply. This place is dreaming, she said, and so you walked lightly, barefoot, breath slow. At the center of that land, you found it. A wide basin, filled with water, so still it mirrored the sky perfectly. You could not tell where air ended and reflection began. Around its edges, small bones, bird, mouse, fish arranged in spirals, not by wind, by hands. Recent. Someone had come before you, or never left. You camped at the edge, careful not to disturb the water. At night, no one spoke. Even the fire seemed to burn more quietly. The boy sat close, his eyes wide. Do you think we'll leave marks behind? He asked. You thought of the cave, of the handprints, of the songs. Yes, you said, but not the kind we can see. He nodded. I want to leave something, he whispered. You handed him a stick of charcoal. He found a flat rock. He began to draw a spiral, fire, a figure standing alone beneath the stars. He didn't show it to anyone. He just placed the rock gently at the water's edge and walked away. The next morning, the wind had shifted again, cooler now, carrying the scent of distant frost. You turned north, and the group followed. The journey grew harder, the air thinner, the trees sparser, the nights colder. You wrapped furs tighter, huddled closer, spoke less, but you still moved. Because that's what you had become, a people of motion, of memory, of land carried in the body, not bound to the place. One night, a woman gave birth by the side of a frozen stream. No one panicked. She had done it before. The baby cried once, then opened its eyes and stared into the dark. It was given a name, not from the ancestors, but from the wind. You did not stop for more than a day. The baby was carried in a sling, swaddled in warmth and song. The group continued, always forward, and the land changed again. Ahead, the sky opened wider, the stars brighter, the ground whiter with frost each morning. You came to a cliff overlooking a wide expanse of frozen river. its surface cracked like old skin. You sat there for a long while. No one spoke. No one needed to. This was not the end, just a pause, a breath, the spiral turning inward again before unfolding once more, and in that stillness, the boy whispered a word you didn't recognize, not from either language, not from any story, something new, and you repeated it. So did the others, and in that moment, it became real. Just a word. A future. The wind no longer carried urgency. It moved now with the patience of old rivers, gliding between the shoulders of mountains and slipping beneath the low-hanging branches of pine. It touched the group like a memory rather than a message, a soft hand reminding them that everything had its season, and each step was only a page in a much longer story. The land was turning to frost. Mornings arrived wrapped in white breath, the grass stiff beneath your soles, the sky a pale wash of colorless light. The trees that remained were tall, bare, and quiet, their trunks lined with the scars of time and weather. The group moved slower, not from weakness, but from reverence. Every sound felt louder in the stillness. Every motion left a trace. You led them across a field of stone, wide and flat, where moss once grew thick, but now had shriveled into brittle patches. The sky above it opened without resistance, and for the first time in many nights, the stars seemed to press down with presence not distant, but near, as if they too were part of the story unfolding below. The boy had taken to walking slightly ahead now, his curved tool still at his side, though worn smoother with use. He rarely asked questions anymore. Instead, he pointed things out. A set of antlers left, tangled in a bush, a series of cracks in the ice that resembled the veins of a leaf, the print of a bird with only one foot. He had learned not just to see, but to connect. The girl with the painted arms often walked with him. She spoke little, but when she did, it was always in metaphor, comparing clouds to forgotten elders, or frozen puddles to sleeping mouths. The two of them had started marking the path with symbols, twisted sticks, bundles of grass, small piles of stone arranged in loops or triangles. You never told them to stop. The land was learning them as much as they were learning the land. Food became harder to find. The roots grew deeper, the berries fewer. The game moved like ghosts through the white woods, visible one moment and gone the next. But the group had grown clever. Snares were set with care, fish speared through holes in the ice. When a kill was made, it was honored with silence and shared without question. One evening, you found a cave not deep, but sheltered from the wind, its entrance half buried in snow. Inside, dry leaves rustled underfoot. The walls were bare, but the air held a stillness that made you stop moving. You lit no fire. Instead, you sat, feeling the cold stone against your back, the rhythm of your breath matching the darkness. The others gathered slowly, some curled beside each other for warmth. The boy sat with the girl. A child fell asleep with the carved figure pressed against their chest. That night, you dreamed of warmth, not from fire, from memory, from hands, from song. You awoke to find the sky burning orange with dawn, the cave mouth glowing like the eye of something ancient and kind. The group moved again south, not north, but across. You followed the line of the frozen river for 3 days, watching the way it wound through valleys and split around islands of ice. On the 4th day, you came upon another group, smaller, thinner. Their faces were drawn, but their eyes were bright. They stood across the ice, watching. No one moved. The boy raised his hand. The other group mimicked him. A pause. Then the boy stepped forward. You did not stop him. He walked slowly to the center of the ice, placing one foot carefully before the other. The surface creaked, but held. From the other side, a girl stepped out. Not the same girl, but a mirror, younger, with hair in knots and a string of beads at her neck. She reached him. They stood together. Then, without a word, she handed him a bundle wrapped in fur. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside, dried roots, a sharpened blade of bone, a string of carved shells. He nodded and handed her a pouch from his belt. Seeds, a bit of smoked meat, a charm made from red thread and feather. They bowed, and each returned to their side. The message was clear. And no need for war. Only witness. That night, 2 fires burned again, across the frozen divide. Songs were sung, but not loud, not joyful, steady, low, like heartbeat. The 2 groups did not merge, but they had become part of each other's story. In the days that followed, the frost deepened. Snow began to fall in earnest, soft, steady flakes that blanketed the trees and silenced the ground. The group wrapped themselves in layered furs, moved more slowly, relied on one another more closely. The boy crafted snowshoes from branches and sinew. The girl learned to shape fire from cold coals. Children were taught to sleep close and speak soft. Time stretched. It no longer moved in hours or days. It moved in breaths, in shared glances, in the way you learned the scent of bark. Even when the world turned white, you found another cave larger, this time, with the stream running just beneath the floor, warm from the heart of the mountain. Steam rose from cracks in the stone. The group moved inside and made camp. You stayed there for 3 full moons, and in that stillness, something changed. You began to dream not of where you had been, but of where you had never gone. Not the past, the future. A land with tall grass and warm air. A place where children would run without needing to hide. Where stories would be told not around a fire, but in the open, under stars not feared, but named. You did not speak of this at first, but others began to dream the same. The boy drew maps on the wall of the cave, not of rivers or trees, but of feelings, of places he had never seen but somehow knew. The elders began to speak in new rhythms, combining words from both tribes, creating something that sounded like rain falling on stone. The children made songs from silence. When you finally emerged from the cave, the snow was beginning to soften. The sun had grown bolder. The river had begun to crack and flow again. The world was waking. The group did not celebrate. They moved forward. But now, each person carried more than just tools or food. They carried possibility. The weight of it was gentle like firelight, like story. You woke the next morning with the sky a soft gray dome overhead. The light stretched thin but gentle. The air smelled faintly of reeds and cooled ash, and somewhere nearby, water lapped quietly against the shore. Around you, the people had already begun their tasks without needing direction. The girl was collecting damp leaves with 2 younger children, guiding them to choose only those that folded, not crumbled, in their hands. The boy stood at the lake's edge, staring out over the still surface. His reflection was long and quiet. You could see he was thinking, not about where to go, but about where they already were. That day was spent in making, not movement, not survival, but creation. Someone carved a bowl with handles shaped like river curves. Another crafted a flute from hollow reed, its voice low and haunting. 2 children made a kind of net, not for catching, but for tossing pebbles. In rhythm, creating a game no one remembered teaching them. The boy spent hours twisting thin strands of plant into rope, then using it to lash together long sticks into a frame. The girl painted it lines and waves, sun and moons, and somewhere in the corner, a handprint so faint it was almost a whisper. That night, it rained for the first time in many days. A warm rain, soft, steady. And no one ran for cover. Some tilted their heads back and let it wash their faces. The girl lifted her arms and turned slowly, the rain tracing her painted lines like the fingers of old spirits. The boy stood beside her, palms upward, mouth open to catch the drops. And you, older now, slower in the knees, but steady in step, you watched. And you smiled, because this was what survival had become. Not just getting through, but being, fully, softly, deeply. When the rain passed, the group decided to move, not because the lake had become unkind, but because their feet still remembered the rhythm of travel. You packed your belongings in silence. No urgency, no sorrow. The spiral continued, and you would follow it. You walked south this time, the land sloping gradually downward. Forests thinned. The air grew warmer still. Along the way, you passed the bones of animals you could not name, huge ribs that arched from the ground like the remnants of ships left behind in dried oceans. The children touched them without fear, tracing their shapes, naming them things. like cloudwalker or leaf giant. No one corrected them. There was no need. In the evenings, the fire returned, larger now, not for warmth, but for gathering. Stories grew longer. They no longer began with once, but with remember. And memory became the glue that held the group in motion. Then one night, the boy approached you with the carved frame he had made. It was no longer empty. It had been strung with threads and dried gut, woven tightly into a surface. He tapped it lightly, and it made a sound deep and steady, like distant thunder rolling across a plain. "What is it?" someone asked. The boy didn't answer. He played it, slowly, rhythmically. The sound settled over the camp like a blanket, and one by one, the others joined in, clapping hands, tapping stones, humming. The girl began to dance again, this time not for herself, but for the circle. She moved with intent, each step telling a part of a story that had no words. And when she finished, no one clapped. They sat in silence, because silence was enough. The days passed. Not quickly, not slowly, just as they always had, without needing to be counted. One morning, a new scent came on the wind. Salt. You knew what it meant before anyone else saw it. The ocean. The great water. You had heard stories of it, where the land ends, where the waves speak their own language, where everything begins again. You told the group, and they did not cheer. They simply kept walking, because they had become something else, a people of continuation. You reached the edge by late afternoon. The cliffs fell steep and sudden, jagged teeth against a roaring sea. The children gasped. Even the elders paused. The horizon stretched impossibly far, the sun's reflection broken across the churning surface like shattered glass. The boy stepped forward, close to the edge, letting the wind whip his hair. He turned, face serious. "This is not the end," he said. "No," you replied. "This is the breath before the next step." And that evening, you did not build shelters. You built a circle of stones. You placed in it objects from every stop: charcoal from the cave, feathers from the river, shells from the lake, carvings, bones, threads, flowers. A spiral etched into the center. The girl placed her hand on it last, then stood, and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The story would continue. Not here, not tomorrow, but always. In someone else's step. In someone else's song. In the quiet spaces between firelight and sleep. And so, under stars that had watched your journey from its first footfall, you closed your eyes and listened to the wind carry it forward. The spiral turned again. It breathed, roared, whispered, pulled an endless conversation between sky and water, one that had begun long before any foot had touched soil. The waves were slow today, not crashing, but curling in deliberate rhythm, as if showing the people the way forward without rushing them. The cliffs where you stood seemed older than memory, carved by storms and salted winds. The rock beneath your feet was dark and heavy, scattered with tiny shells pressed into its surface like quiet fossils. You could feel the pulse of the earth, here, not in the ground, but in the air. A kind of hum, subtle and constant, like something larger than life breathing just out of sight. The people gathered close to the edge, not to challenge it, not to conquer it, but simply to see. For many, it was the first time they had ever looked out over endless water. For the children, it was both thrilling and confusing. How could there be no trees, no hills, no other side? Some laughed, others squinted, trying to find a shape in the horizon. One child asked, "Is this where the world ends?" "No," you said softly. "It's where it folds." The boy sat cross-legged near the cliff's edge, his eyes closed, his hands resting on his knees. He had become the kind of quiet that carried weight. When he spoke now, people listened, not just with their ears, but with the stillness of their whole bodies. The girl with the painted arms stood nearby, her skin now marked with blue spirals that curled around her wrists and disappeared under her sleeves. She held a handful of wet sand, letting it drip slowly between her fingers. No one spoke of leaving. No one asked where next. The sea had shifted something in them. After a life of movement, of seeking the next ridge, the next river, the next shelter, they had arrived somewhere that asked not for answers, but but for listening. And so they stayed. Days passed. The cliffs became a home not because they were easy, but because they were honest. The wind was strong, sometimes so loud it drowned out speech. But the people learned to speak with hands, with glances, with rhythm. Fish were pulled from the sea in small traps, salt gathered in the cracks of rocks. Seabirds brought feathers, and children began weaving them into new shapes. The fires were smaller, were not needed for warmth, but still lit, not to cook, but to hold space for the stories that continued to grow. You began waking earlier, before the first light touched the water. You would sit on the same smooth stone every morning, watching the sky turn from indigo to gray to gold. Some days the sea was still, other days it heaved and moaned like a great beast in sleep. But always it moved. It never stilled completely. The boy built something new. Not a tool, not a drum, not a net. It was a long piece of wood, curved slightly, with the bones of fish tied along its length like ribs. When the wind passed through it, it made a sound, like whistling breath. He planted it in the earth at the edge of the cliff, facing the sea. It sang constantly now, a song, always changing, never loud. No one dared move it. It had become part of the place. The girl started painting the stones again, not with symbols this time, but with colors. Pale reds, soft grays, streaks of white that looked like waves crashing or hands reaching. The younger ones helped, dipping feathers into ground shells and moss, leaving their marks alongside hers. The rocks along the cliffside began to bloom, not with flowers, but with memory. One night, under a sky so clear you could see the echo of galaxies, an elder began to speak. Her voice was slow and full of space. "We are not the first to find the edge," she said, "and we won't be the last." Silence followed. Then she looked to the boy. "And you, what do you hear now?" The boy didn't answer right away. He listened. Then he said, "I hear that the story isn't finished." Someone asked, "But what if the path ends here?" And the girl replied, "Then we draw another." There was no argument, no fear, only a soft nodding of heads. So they began to prepare again, not in haste, not out of hunger or cold, but out of the quiet knowledge that their steps still had something to offer the world. They began building small boats, simple, round-bottomed, made of bark and resin, sealed with wax and softened skin. They did not know if they would float. They had never needed to float before, but the sea had asked a question, and this was their answer. One boat at a time, they tested. Some sank, some spun in circles, but some held, and the people learned. Not from fear, from trying, from failing, from adjusting, until finally, they had 3 vessels that would carry them. They chose not the strongest among them to go first, but the ones who had listened best. The boy, the girl, and a child, the youngest walker, small and quick, with eyes that never missed anything. They set out at dawn, not far, just enough to lose sight of shore and return again. The sea was kind that day, and when they returned, soaked but safe, with seaweed wrapped around their shoulders and salt crusted on their cheeks, the people did not cheer. They sang, low and steady, a song without words, just breath. The wind carried it far. They would not all leave. Some would stay, because memory needs roots as much as it needs wings. But the boats were ready. The tide would come again. The sea would rise, and when it did, they would follow, not to escape, but to continue, because that is what they were now. A story that never ends, a spiral that never closes. And as the stars faded into dawn, and the first lights touched the carved stones along the cliff, the boy stood, with the sea behind him and the people before him, and he whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the whole world, "We remember." And the wind replied, "So will I." The boats were not many, and they were not fast, but they were enough. They rested on the shoreline like strange animals, their curved bellies pressing into the sand, waiting not for command, but for wind. They had been shaped from what the people had learned of trees, of fire, of resin, and patience. Nothing had been rushed. They were not built to conquer the sea. They were built to meet it. The first journey was small. The boy, the girl, and the youngest child paddled just beyond the mouth of the bay, where the cliffs gave way to open sea. They did not speak much. The boy kept his gaze steady on the horizon. The girl watched the shape of the clouds. The child dipped fingers into the water, trailing small whirlpools behind them. The ocean was calmer than expected. It did not greet them with thunder or roar. It only rocked them gently, reminding them of the fire's rhythm of breath, of the long story behind them and the one ahead. When they returned to the cliffs, the people greeted them not with applause or celebration, but with open arms and warm silence. They were not returning heroes. They were returning messengers, and their message was clear. It is possible, not easy, not certain, but possible. That evening, a new fire was lit, not in the center of the camp, but higher, on a flat outcrop that looked over the sea. Its light was not meant to warm the skin. It was meant to shine out over the water, to mark the place where land had paused. But story had not. Around it, the people gathered slowly, each one carrying something: a bundle of leaves, a smooth stone, a carved tool, a strip of cloth. They placed these at the base of the flame not as offerings, but as acknowledgments. These were pieces of themselves, of what they had been. They would not take them forward, but they would not leave them behind without notice. The elder who had spoken of first now sat by the fire, a blanket around her shoulders, her hands folded like old roots. She did not speak again. She only smiled, and somehow, that smile said everything. Over the next days, the camp became quieter. The children still played, but their games had changed. They now built small boats from bark and leaves, setting them adrift in tide pools, watching them float and flip and vanish. The adults began to walk alone more often, tracing the cliff paths, sitting for long periods with nothing but the wind for company. You saw the change, not sadness, not fear, but awareness, the kind that comes when a long chapter nears its final page. You found yourself walking to the same carved stone each morning, the one marked with red spirals and tiny white stars. It had become a marker now, not just for where you were, but who you had been. You placed your hand on it and closed your eyes. You thought of the first shelter, the first fire, the first voice to call you by name. You thought of snow melting into rivers, of berries ripening on the vine, of footsteps echoing through hollow trees. You remembered each part of the journey, not as images, but as feelings, and then you let them go, because the story would carry them, even if your feet no longer did. The first boat left at sunrise. The boy stood at its front, the girl beside him, the youngest child curled up at the base, wrapped in furs. Behind them, two others rowed in silence. The sea had pulled back just enough to make the launch smooth. The boat cut a clean line through the water, rising and falling with the rhythm of the world. One wave. One called out. They simply watched and listened. The boat grew smaller and smaller until it became only a shape against the water, and then the horizon took it. But the story did not end. That night, no one lit the fire. They sat in darkness, under a sky bursting with stars, and the wind carried a new sound, not a song, not a voice, but something older, the memory of movement, of people, of time. And the sea, vast and breathed, listened, and whispered it back. The next morning, the sea was restless again, not angry, never angry, but awake. Waves came in at a sharper angle, lifting seaweed onto the sand, dropping small gifts from deep water, a polished bone, a curled shell, the tangled skeleton of a fish long gone. The air was thicker too, scented with brine and the sharp trace of something distant and blooming. The people stood once again on the cliffs, watching the water shift and speak, their eyes following the horizon as if searching for a message just out of reach. The second boat was prepared quietly. The group that would go had been chosen not by strength or age, but by a soft understanding. Those who had begun dreaming of places they hadn't seen, who now walked with their eyes half elsewhere. They carried small bundles, not much more than what would fit in a bowl. A flint, a carved figure, a thread of red wool. One woman carried a single egg wrapped in moss. No one asked why. You helped them push off, your hands wet with spray, Feet dug into the sand, and again, no one waved. They floated for a time in silence, the oars dipping rhythmically into the sea. And then they, too, vanished. Not disappeared. Just beyond. The people who remained grew fewer, but also more still. Their movements were slow now, because of age, but because there was nowhere to rush. They gathered near the fire again, though it burned lower each night. The songs changed, fewer rhythms, more space between notes. Some nights were filled with silence so deep, you could hear the scrape of sand shifting under wind. You walked the same path each day, tracing the cliff's edge from end to end. You noticed the way the wind carved the rock now, the tiny hollows growing deeper. You noticed how the grass curled inward before rain, how the birds disappeared just before the moon turned. These things had always been happening, but now, you saw them. One evening, you sat beside the elder. She hadn't spoken in days. Her eyes followed the clouds now more than faces. She had become part of the place, like a tree, like a stone. After a long silence, she said, "I saw them." "Who?" "The ones who will come after." Her voice wasn't trembling, it was sure, like water moving under ice. They were small, and they had lines on their faces they didn't understand, but they carried the sound of our stories in their bones. You didn't ask what it meant, you just nodded, because some truths arrive like wind, they pass through, and you carry them without knowing. Then one morning, without decision or announcement, the third boat was readied. There were few of you now, only those who had not yet heard the call to leave or who had chosen, quietly, to remain. You stood at the edge of the water again, but this time, you did not watch. You stepped in. The boat rocked gently under your weight. Someone handed you a length of dried meat. Another tucked a feather into the folds of your cloak. No words were spoken. The sky was clear. The sea was calm. You pushed off. The water took you slowly. The shore receded. The cliffs, the stones, the spirals, all became smaller until they folded into the land and disappeared, and in their place, only water, only wind, only the sound of your breath. You looked back once, not to mourn, but to remember, and then forward. The girl sat near the front of the boat now, her arms resting on her knees. Her paint faded, but still present. The boy held the oars. He did not row hard. He let the sea decide. And the child, not a child anymore, but something older, something rooted, leaned against the side of the boat and stared into the water. There, reflected in the moving mirror below, was not a single face, but many. Yours, theirs, the ones who had walked before, the ones who would walk after, and in that reflection was the answer to the question no one had dared to speak aloud. What happens next? The reflection replied, everything. Because you had learned what it meant to survive without forgetting how to feel. You had learned to listen to silence, to speak with the fire, to walk not to arrive, but to witness. You had learned the stories were not held in the mouth, but in the way hands moved, in the way feet pressed into the earth, in the curve of a carved bone passed from palm to palm. You had learned that the Stone Age was not an age of endings, but of openings. That time had not left these people behind. Time had begun with them, and as your boat drifted toward the far horizon, the sea holding you like a mother holds a sleeping child, the wind at your back and the sun before you, there was no fear, only breath, only rhythm, only story, still unfolding, still alive, still yours.